Hello gamers, this is Seb. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about a mindful topic. We're going to talk about psionic abilities. First we'll delve into the psionic abilities by themselves, mechanically, by the rules, how to do them, how to construct them, how to understand their framework, and then at the end we will talk a bit about how to run a campaign including psionic abilities. So let's begin with the powers themselves. So when we mean psionic abilities, if you don't know, and you probably already know about psychic abilities, but just in case, um, here's a broad definition of psionic abilities. So the word comes from two words. It's a portmanteau. Psi for psychic, the mind, and onic comes from electronics. See, back in the day, there was this idea of exploring the mind using engineering and computers and electronics. Um, and the science fiction author just portmanteau this word. So generally, when we mean psionic abilities, we mean all the listed phenomena here: mind over matter, mind powers, up to psychic phenomena and levitation and teleportation and the ESP mediumship, uh, speaking with ghosts and those types of abilities. So that being out of the way, GURPS proposed psionic abilities since inception, since the beginning. In third edition, where my history with GURPS began, the offering is thus: you have the GURPS basic sets, and then you have GURPS Psionic supplement. It's worth noting that in the basic set, even in third edition, Chapter 20 is dedicated to psionic abilities. They are the most basic and common abilities you can find, like telepathy and ESP. So if you want more details about these abilities, GURPS Psionics is a better choice. You'll have more details about abilities, and um, and these books are still usable today. GURPS Psionics for third edition, I would still today use it almost as is. So in fourth edition, the offering is varied and a bit confusing for those who don't know about the whole GURPS line. So first you have still the GURPS basic set, not on the picture here. Chapter 6 in the basic is dedicated to psionic abilities, and there is more choices than the previous edition. You will find teleportation, telekinesis, uh, more abilities. If it's still not enough for your game, you have GURPS Powers, which is a big book about everything powers. And of course, there are some bits here and there about mind powers. So this book provides you with a way of building, customizing powers. It adds suggestions on how to do various powers. It gives you new enhancement and limitations. And finally, you have a line spearheaded by Jason Levine, which is GURPS Psionic Powers. This book gives you the tools to approach and deal with psionic abilities as they did in third edition, since fourth edition took a more advantage focused uh, framework or way of approaching everything. Psionic Powers and the PDFs that comes with it is like a throwback to how things worked in third edition. So let's talk about the anatomy of psionic powers. So as you can see here, there's like two different ways of doing psionic abilities in GURPS now. Um, and that's just by default. If you're creative, you can build a new one and new system. But basically, there's the third edition way of doing it and the fourth edition. In third edition, you buy a power, an advantage, which is in levels, and then you buy skills to use that power. So that's the third edition way, and that's the new edition Psionic Powers line way of doing it. So for example here, if you buy telepathy at level 5, it costs you 25 points. And in the system, telepathy, what you can do with telepathy or other psionic abilities is determined by your levels. So in this case, telepathy level 5 will give you a certain range you can use your telepathy. In the case of telekinesis, it will represent the strength of what you can lift or manipulate at a distance. And then you have to buy skills, mental hard skills to use that power, that telepathy power. Here, telesend to send your thoughts, and telereceive to receive thoughts. So that's the gist of it for the third edition way of doing Psionics abilities. Now, in fourth edition, the scheme is a little bit more detailed, but in a way, it's more simple too. In fourth edition, the scheme is you buy a power, an advantage, and then you buy, if you will, optional, you can buy another advantage called talent to give you bonus to use your power. In a sense, you could just buy an advantage and be done with it. But if you want your character to be more skillful in using his power, a talent is a good advantage. A talent is just a fourth edition invention that gives you a bonus on your attributes when you are using your power. So the fourth edition way of doing psionic ability and any other powers is that you buy an advantage, and then you are using things like IQ, will, in some cases health and strength to roll for success, for your success rolls, to see if you are able to pull off your power or not. So here, for example, and this is simple as it is, where it's going a bit complicated is when you buy the advantages by themselves. In fourth edition, sending your thoughts is the telecommunication advantage, and receive thoughts is mind reading. So you need to buy two effect, two advantage to do a full telepath, for example. So basically, in fourth edition, you don't need to buy skills. You buy a talent to increase your performance with the power. And you have these nifty power modifier. For example, here, telepathy minus 10%. You see, since everything in fourth edition is an advantage, or at least power-wise, powers found in the basic set are meant to be generic, vanilla application of these effects. And as such, there's no differences between a robot using telecommunication via a laser beam and a telepath master who is reaching his gifted student at a distance. So GURPS 4th edition introduced the idea that you can limit those powers to create variation, to create slightly variation of these advantages to differentiate between a robot using a laser beam and a psychic master. So that's why you will see power modifier such as telepathy minus 10%. And for some people, for some person, some gamer, you it doesn't mean anything by itself. If you buy a power and then declare it's telepathy minus 10%, where does that minus 10% comes from? So to cast light on that problematic, you need to read to read about limitations, and a solid read of the GURPS Power can inform you better about this. For example, here a telepathy power would be considered to be vulnerable or weak against certain anti-psi power or anti-psi technology or contraption. So limiting these powers gives you with the system a minus 10%. But it's okay if your game doesn't make those differences. If you don't want to go granular in your campaign, you have my permission to not use these limitations. If you're playing a superhero game and every power is just the same and you don't need to differentiate, just buy the advantage and don't mind with that. But if your campaign is a bit more not realistic, but if you want to differentiate between different abilities, limitations are a good way to do that. So enough with that. So a telepathy power, for example, using the GURPS Powers framework would resemble this. It's just a list of abilities. You have the talent above at 5 points per level. This is a bonus to your IQ or will roll when you're using your telepathy powers. And then you have a list of telepathic abilities or telepathic-like abilities. This list is not exhaustive. It's not meant to be applicable to your game. If your game just used 3 or 4 of these, it's okay too. That's just a list. So these are suggestions, for example, and we can find this in the GURPS Powers book. So yeah, so you pick and choose. You buy what you need, what you want for your character concept, and you let the rest. So for example, if I'm doing Charles the telepath, wink wink, that would give you here an idea of how to create such a character. It's very bare bone, but you can see here that I've chosen a high IQ with the telepathy talent at level 2, giving him a 15 effective skill to use his telepathy power, which is pretty solid. Then a telesend and a mind reading ability to have a conversation both ways. And then I thought it would be fun to do the X-Men 2 power where Charles Xavier stop a room, just make everything in the room frozen in place. So it's an affliction. It's an area-based affliction. It's a malediction. It is broadcasted through the walls, and people have a slim chance of resisting that effect. So that's just an idea here. So how do you use powers in play? Well, it's the same for any powers. It's the same mechanic as spells or generic vanilla ability. And on that subject, many advantages in GURPS could be considered a psionic ability. things such as luck, such as charisma. Luck could be a probability manipulation power using psionic focus. Charisma could be an empathic projection, things like that. You will basically found everything you need in the basic set, and the other source book will help you maybe make meaningful choice for your campaign. Anyway, back to how to use Psionics. So on your turn, you choose the concentrate maneuver. Your character does nothing but concentrate. During your concentration, if you are forced to do active defense, dodge, parry, if you're knocked down, injured, distracted, your concentration could give up. So you need to roll a will -3 to see if you keep your power or not. And when your turn is over, when the other turn begins, you just use your ability. If you are in a rush, if you are in a stressful situation, most of the time you will roll your IQ to see if you succeed or not. Sometimes it can be will, depending on the circumstances. The game master will maybe suggest some ability, but by default it's IQ because mind power. So to end the video, how to run Psionics in a campaign? Well, it's broad and generic here, but first you could ask yourself where the psionic ability comes from. Is it something biological? Is it something chemical, toxic? Is it a psychic phenomena in the universe? Is it planets aligning? Is it something? It can be useful to think about the sources of the different sources of psionic ability. The most common one is probably just that the humans all have these abilities inherently and can train in them. Number two, what is the place of psionic people in your world? Are they secret organization? Are they clubs? Are there factions in your world? Does the governments of the world know about the psionic phenomena, or is it some just a few person in the world know about? And then if you want, you can create an entire campaign around psionics abilities. Most often psionics will just be in an already existing campaign or world, most of the time, because it's fun to have a melting pot of different powers interacting together. But if you're taking Psionics on the road, you can ask yourself the question about the theme of your campaign. So what will be the game about? Is it going to be an X-Men thing where the young gifted are approached by a mentor, a bald mentor, or the one of my favorite are the PCs some guinea pigs for a psychotronic or psionic drug experiment gone bad, and they are now on the run from the Men in Black. And lastly, you need to pay attention to how psionic ability can work in your campaign. As the GM, you need to be prepared to handle the subtle and spectacular ways psionics can change the most basic scene. For example, if you plan to run a murder mystery, but one of your guys have psychometry, you're pretty much screwed. Just a few touch of a different object touching the cold dead body, and and the psionic investigator could solve the case on the spot. So thinking about knowing, having a list of your PC's abilities behind the screen, studying those abilities could give you a much better leverage on the game. To use the previous example, if my psychic investigator touched the cold body, I could just start describing the scenes to the investigator. But what if the scene happened in the dark? So maybe it's not possible to see the face of the murderer in the dark. So that could spin the murder mystery into another direction, leading to more legwork, real world legwork and investigation and criminology, forensic, instead of just having this guy. But it can be not fun for the psychic investigator, because he bought these abilities and the player wants to use them most likely. So how about this? You make the psychic investigator read the corpse. He see the crimes happening, but he see that the murderer is wearing a clown mask, and after the deed, maybe the clown start to talk to the PC from the past and say something like, "Game is on, my man. Game is on. Try to find me before next week, next day. You have 24 hours to find me, or I will kill another one." Something like that. And now the game is becoming a psychological game, hunting the psychic serial killer. So yeah, so that was my GURPS Psionic episode. Thanks for watching, and I will leave you with a psychic message.